But anyways, man, welcome to the show. You're an interesting character for us folk of the MMA world. You've obviously been around a while, but you almost one of those ghostly type characters that it's not in the front light. So just maybe tell us about, I mean, you're a BJJ black belt, a Judo Black Belt as well, I understand. So let's maybe start there. Tell us where that whole journey began.
I think it's a very interesting story. Actually, I used to be a professional tennis player, and I tried to make it on the tour. I went after school, went to the States, and I missed contact sports. I missed just the physicality of it, and I was quite an aggressive tennis player. So I decided to rather move over, and I met a guy. I moved into a house, and I met a professional boxer there. We started running, doing road running in the mornings, and it was, I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. So I started with boxing. I started preparing for amateur fights, and I had 1 or 2 really good sparring sessions. And in that time, I got involved with a business, and I met some guys that do judo, and I said, well, I'll come and have a look. And I saw a UFC event at the same time.
Sure.
It was a fight with Karo Parisian and Matt Serra. It was somewhere in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, way back.
And I saw that fight, and it intrigued me. There was a lot of thought behind what the guys were doing. It wasn't just brawling, a lot of technique, and I really enjoyed that. So, and I saw quite a bit of strategy in there, and a whole array of techniques. So that was slightly different from the boxing element at that stage. And I said, well, it intrigued me, so I wanted to go have a look. So I met the judo guys. I went to my first judo session. I just sat and watched the class, and I was hooked. Everybody that was there said after that first day, seeing me there, seeing my face when I was doing it, when I was watching, it was just amazing. And I went back the next day for training, and I started, and I still kept on boxing. And I think it was 3 months, I did my first competition, and I think I came second. And it was like a complete, it just fit. And but I saw Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I wanted to do that at the same time. I wanted to explore that, and there was no gyms at that stage. Coming from Pretoria, there were no gyms in this side doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I went to Joburg, started there. I drove 55 kilometers every night one way to get to classes. So I was doing judo and doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of at the same time. And yeah, I just evolved from there. Judo was really good because there were a lot of competitions. I could compete 2-3 times a month. I had a coach that was very dedicated and really wanted to help me. So we spent a lot of time. I trained during the day. I trained in the evening classes. I was fortunate enough to be able to train with the national team at that stage, and that helped my progress quite a lot. I was a bit older when I started, so it was interesting, and I had a lot of ground to make up. But I like a challenge, and but it was also a very natural fit for me. Grappling was something I really enjoyed, and it just worked for me. So, and it was very interesting. The two styles, judo and jiu-jitsu, the way they interplay. In my judo competitions, I used quite a lot of groundwork.
Sure.
And it helped me using the Brazilian jiu-jitsu there. And then the other way, going to Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitions and using quite a lot of judo there, it made it quite an interesting dilemma for certain people, because they weren't used to the things that I was doing at the time. So that helped me quite a lot to progress quickly. And then it was just time. I just kept at it, and I had certain goals that I wanted to reach, and the journey started there and still going.
Okay, fantastic. Just in there's a gray area of South African Jiu-Jitsu that I always like to dive into. Obviously, you said you had to drive 55 kilometers and so on, and I mean, obviously I have the privilege of running around and speaking to people like yourself and hearing all these crazy stories, like even some of the MMA fighters telling about stories where they started, even like Gareth, about fighting in a tent in a parking lot somewhere in Durban,
I've seen one or two of those.
So there's this whole like grey or like forgotten era almost that I don't think the modern day fan understands or actually realizes that all this craziness
so available now.
Sure, exactly. So just give us an insight of what it was like when you first started as a white belt in Jiu-Jitsu in South Africa. Like how accessible was it to get new techniques or training or class facilities like we see today with like guys with full-on decked zebra mats all over the place and 200,000 Rand installations and stuff like that?
I was very fortunate. I started out, I trained with Vicker Swart. At that stage, I think he was still a brown belt. And it was the school, his school at that stage was stacked. There were guys like Dennis Opsino, Liam Cleland. There were so many guys in that school at that stage and that were good. And another good friend of mine, Martin Boyson, he was there as well. And we were a group of guys. I was a white belt. Some of them were blue belts, some purple belts. And on a Saturday, for instance, you go and you roll, you got 2 hours of proper rolling in, where it was hard from start to finish. So that was really good. I must say that at that stage I bought every instructional DVD that I can that I could get my hands on, and we shared alike. Somebody else would buy something and then pirate copy it that we don't say on the radio. But we did that, and we also had like classes. We had like on a Sunday we would have guys just meet up in a garage somewhere. I used to have my own mats at my house, so my brother and I and some other guys used to just come in, and then we used to drill techniques and like fight it out. And I saw this technique in the week, I tried this, and we were building our games like that. And we actually put in a lot of extra effort at that time because it wasn't so accessible, and it wasn't possible to just go to a school and follow a curriculum. We had to do our own thing. But I think that's part of the beauty of it. And I've always had a way of trying to figure things out for myself, and that actually helped me quite a lot in my journey to do that.
Sure.
To train that way. I think I find it difficult sometimes to follow like strict guidelines and rules, like in terms of a curriculum. If it's too set out, I like to build my own style, and that was kind of at that stage what was available. We had to, and that's how we evolved. So it was interesting, but it was difficult. Like for guys to be able to get together, I was just really fortunate to land up with that group. I think some other guys had it really difficult.
No, sure, and it's like such interesting topic coming up now at the moment. A lot of, if we can say, the guys that had to break the ground in like corner pockets of the world. If you weren't in Brazil or like in the right place in the States at the time, you had to kind of figure all of this stuff out for yourself and develop your own style. So do you think like let's call it the difficulties you had to face as a BJJ student at the time actually developed your game now, or like helped you mold as a BJJ player, because you had to appreciate what you learned so much more and develop your own kind of style, because it wasn't always just this like flick on the YouTube and drill a technique kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it was two things. It was that, and it was also being exposed to judo. And I think if you're exposed to a takedown element of grappling, be it wrestling or judo, it's that also opens your mind, because it's a whole different set of techniques. And then the question arises, how do you fit that into your jiu-jitsu? It's actually part of it, in general, but taking both of it, separating it, training it differently under a specialized coach that only does wrestling, for instance, or judo, that doesn't necessarily understand the jiu-jitsu concept, and then trying to bring that back. It's always good to get that type of training, that purest form of training. And in our respect, we have some really high-level wrestlers and some high-level judoka and judo coaches in the country. So there's a lot to learn from them.
Sure.
But then bringing that back and making it relevant for what we actually want to achieve in jiu-jitsu or MMA for that matter, that's the hard part. I believe that's part of my skill set, and that's part of the way, just who I am. But that was something that at that stage I really had to figure out. And it was. I believe in general that everybody needs to develop their own style. I really hated when you see a jiu-jitsu player, or even an MMA fighter, and they look like a copy of their coach.
Sure.
They lose their identity. So it's super important, I think, to have that type of a mindset, or have a coach that can guide you through that process. But definitely in the way that we were brought up, through the jiu-jitsu ranks at that stage, it did help us to put these things together and figure it out.
Okay. Obviously, we've just touched on the topic of MMA. You were involved with Fight Fit for Militia for quite some time. So just talk us how that all started and what your actual role there was.
Basically, we started, how many years ago? It was, I think it's 8 years ago now. I was involved with them for more than 6 years. We started out, I had a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school. They needed a seminar at their school. We went out, we did the seminar. I had a French guy at the time that came out and did a seminar for us. So we went there and did a separate seminar. Richie and Chef and myself, we got together got along very well. So we decided they asked me to start coaching there and help them out with the jiu-jitsu. And we were very like-minded at the time. And everything just kind of developed into a friendship relationship, a working relationship. And then I ended up being the grappling coach for Fight Fit Militia for more than 6 years. I took a lot of the guys, like Gareth started as a white belt, Chef as well. Rich was a blue belt at the time. They all came up through the ranks now. They all got their black belts and doing really well. I started with them, and then there obviously all the other guys that came through. I did all their jiu-jitsu, and then in the cornering aspect, I also had a lot to do with certain guys' mental training for them and their preparations for the fights, and then also the around the competitions and around the event itself, how to manage the mental state there and keeping the guys, because there's a lot of outside influence, as you know. And keeping all of that stuff basically out of their face and making sure that they focused on the job that needs to be done, and then had a lot to do with the strategy and tactics that were going to be employed for fights and stuff like that.
Okay. You're basically talking about mental coaching really for fighters. This is a topic that fascinates me because it's, every odd fighter will open up into their thought process in a way, to an extent. And I think one of the biggest things a lot of fighters have to experience is that inclining of doubt that keeps propping up in their minds. And I think it's one of the reasons why MMA athletes train so hard, is that a lot of them feel the harder I train, the less doubts I'll have. So they'll know, look, I've done everything I can humanly possible to be prepared for this fight, and so on and so on. But there is that non-stop recurring theme of just that small piece of doubt. I mean, what these guys are doing and girls are doing is the most extreme of extremes. You know what I mean? It's hand-to-hand combat at the end of the day, and like the consequences are dire. So what sort of stuff would you be doing to kind of help athletes, or let's not say MMA only, like athletes in general, to kind of see their mental processes and keep them on track?
Look, I think there's two elements. Like, firstly, I want to say that I was very fortunate, and I am fortunate, and I still work with a mental coach myself.
Okay.
And he was also the mental coach for Fight Fit Militia. So him and I worked very closely together because I've had a long-standing relationship with him, and I'm involved with the guys every day in the training. So my role with them was to basically apply and make sure that they apply whatever they've been doing, and I was very involved in how their mental processes worked. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is it's really important to understand that mental training and physical training are two very separate things.
Sure.
And a lot of people, if in using an example, like a lot of people train, and they train super hard to try and think that the mental side of things will go away and will disappear. And I think it's, you can try that, but if you've been in that situation, and you're standing next to the mat, and I've been there many times, you stand there in front of, at a cage going to walk through, those thoughts will come in. I mean, there's a reality that hits at some stage, and it's more a question of learning the skills, like you learn fighting skills, learning the skills to deal with that situation when it arises. So basically, in our respect and in the way that we approach it, and that I coach, people, you set a plan. So I decide what the outcome is that I want to achieve on the day, and I have a full-on plan of how I want to achieve it and what's going to happen. And the reality is, it's either going to be me executing my plan or somebody else getting involved in my plan and then basically starting to run their plan on me, and then I have to try and and disrupt that to get back to a neutral point where I can start employing my game again. And the driving force for me is to stay really focused on what I'm there to do, the end goal. Like, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? And the more I keep that process clean, and every time an outside influence wants to come in, it's just remind myself of why I'm there and what's going to happen and how the process is going to work. And because I've played this out through visualization and many other different techniques that we use, I know exactly how things are going to go. So that outside influence will come in, and I'll basically just say, I accept it, I understand it, I feel it, yes, but I'm not going to get attached to that feeling. I leave it. I've got a clear goal, and I focus on what I'm there to achieve. And so the thought will come in and it will leave again. It's not something that when I say attach, that I attach to it and then I start a whole thinking process behind it and trying to rationalize it. And it's a normal feeling to have. I think a lot of people feel stress and then they talk about, I'm stressed, or they feel like the anxiety before the fight. That's super normal. I don't think you can ever get to a point where that's not normal. You will feel some form of, and it will be different for everybody, the level that they experience and probably how exactly that will feel. But that's also the thing that makes you super focused.
Sure.
And that focus that you get, you can actually channel into achieving the result that you want. So I much rather like taking energy, what type of energy it is, positive, negative, and channel it into the goal that I have. And then be really, and that's where your plan or your goal that you need, or the plan to achieve your goal is super important. If your plan is set up, then I take that energy and I run it through the steps that I need to do so that I can reach my end goal. And that's pretty much what we do and what I do and how I teach people. So I think in the physical aspect, if you take an example where our techniques, whatever the techniques are like weapons, and you're building weapons every day. So I'm learning arm bars, chokes, I'm learning punches and kicks and all of these things. But a weapon in itself is useless if you don't have a certain intention, if you don't have a goal of what you're going to do with it. I mean, you can have a weapon and put it on the table right now, and it's not going to do anything to anybody. Doesn't matter how good it is. If you take that weapon and you put it in somebody's hands that have a clear plan and they have an intention of some sort, something's going to happen. And I think that's the element where people don't, with the mental training, they're building weapons, but they don't have clear intentions. They don't have goals and strategies to achieve the goals and all those things. And that's why it's important to get somebody to help you to work around those things. And the physical element in itself will take you so far, but that at the upper echelons, it's about the guys that's got the mental stuff to get, got that side down, not so much just the physical stuff. Physically, there are many good coaches around. There are many, good physical trainers around. The guys are it's changed quite a bit from, years ago where you had guys that were predominantly a grappler or a striker or whatever. Nowadays, you've got guys that have a full-on skill set and they can do everything. And so what is the difference now? It's more or less that mental side, and that can you keep your shit together? Yeah,
100%, 100%. And I think that's, if you look at MMA on a whole, I think that's also, it's like a massive emerging topic. Like, what makes a difference between fighter X and fighter Y? Everyone's putting in, like everyone, like if you watch online, like, work all day, no one works harder than me. Like, everyone says that. Yeah. So what's differentiating one fighter from the other? So do you think in South Africa, it's quite a tough question. I guess it depends how involved you are and who you speak to. Do you think there's enough MMA athletes in South Africa that are concerned with the mental side of MMA?
I can give a very honest answer. And no, honestly, I think not. I think a lot of people are still in the mindset, and it's a very old school mindset, but I think a lot of people are in the mindset of, I'll just out-train somebody. Sure. There's still a lot of people I meet like that, and I think, I think we're past that. I don't think there's enough. There are certain people I know that are super successful, that have mental coaches around them and that are working with them, and I think it's an integral part of your training, as it is having a dietitian nowadays, or having a nutritionalist, or having somebody that looks after conditioning. I mean, in the old days, your coach will tell you some basic stuff about eating and drinking, and don't go out the
egg
night
whites
before. Yeah, exactly. Don't go out the night before and drink and eat your proteins and type of stuff. You know, that you can't do that anymore.
Sure.
You got to be a super disciplined athlete. So if you look at the complete package of an MMA athlete nowadays, you need to have a medical team around you, or at least people that you can consult, from a doctor to a chiro or a physio or a massage therapist or somebody like that. And then you've got nutrition, you've got people that you need to speak to about your diet and not just getting your weight cut down, because that was in the old days, that was a big thing. Sure. Nowadays it's about performance.
Sure.
Can I actually keep my energy levels throughout the fight? How does my diet and my nutrition actually keep me healthy throughout my fight camp? You know, there's so many interesting things around that. And then you've got the physical training. You've got your trainer that needs to either make you explosive or, you know, give you a better gas tank or whatever the case may be, assist you in that. Then you've got the technical side of things, where you obviously want your techniques down and do my techniques fit together, and do I have all of that? Then you have the tactical standpoint, and how do I put all these things together? Yeah. And then we talk about a mental thing, you know, then we're talking about how mentally do I keep all this whole package and all this time that I spent in all these facets. How do I put that together? And that's the mental game. That's the mental thing. I can have one bad thought, have one bad day, and I mess everything up that I've been working for over the last how long. So yeah, I think that a lot of people, you know, don't see it as that necessarily. They're focusing on certain aspects super hard, but that to me is the umbrella that actually puts all of these things together.
Yeah, sure. And it's quite a crazy concept. Like you've pointed a few things out. If you think about all the processes, because everything you've mentioned has got its own little branch, you know what I mean? Because you've got to look at BJJ, then wrestling, then judo, then kickboxing, then Muay Thai, then, you know, guys are throwing in a bit of like whatever else, like traditional martial arts, like they're picking kicks up from there, you know, they're picking up old school Jujitsu moves from there. So it's like this non-stop relevance of information that your brain just has to absorb all the time, you know what I mean? And on top of that, then you've still got to, like, I mean, some guys still have a family life, some guys still go back to a job from 9 to 5, you know what I mean? There's all of this madness that just goes in and around it. So there's so much going on, man. And I think as fans become invested in MMA, I think that becomes the bigger part, and you know that's how people are getting invested into stories. So if you watch like MMA these days, and you've got like engaged series and embedded series, because all of this is basically selling you a story. You're becoming invested in this guy's story and trying to see the road that he's had to take or she's had to take to get to this 25 minutes, you know.
And even that is a snapshot. When you look at somebody's story, you might see a week in their life. Sure. And what went in before that, and you know, and what's still going to happen after that. It's crazy.
No, it's madness, man. And I think that in itself is the massive beauty of the sport. Is how much stuff comes together. I mean, if you watch a rugby team, you know, like they drill some lineouts, they drill some scrums, they do some moves, and that's it. They play their game. You know what I mean? Like obviously the guys work on strength and conditioning and fitness and stuff like that, but it's like a very small pool of things you have to know and understand and get better at. You know what I mean? Like if you're a scrum half, you've got to practice a pass left and right and a box kick, let's say, for example, and you can drill that over and over and over and over again until you become a professional. You know, you give your 10,000 hours and bang, you can do it. When it comes to MMA, there's just to give 10,000 hours to every single movement of every single discipline. It's insanity, man. And I think that's quite something that's quite interesting to me. Is if you see an MMA athlete, let's say like a youngster, let's say JP Bays, for example, you see him now and what he's capable of at 22 years old. Yeah. He hasn't even started, you know what I mean? We haven't even seen the very beginning of him, you know what I mean? And like he's still got so much more to go, because he could only give X amount of hours into everything that he's done already, you know what I mean? And he's still got this whole path ahead of him. And this is what's insane to me, is how the generations are getting younger and what they can do and what they still have to achieve, you know what I mean? And that's quite something. And it's, you know, the mental side for me fascinates me, and then the next big thing that I'm always interested in is the evolution of MMA, you know, from maybe when you were younger, you know, especially in Joburg, you're like, geez, that guy's a cage fighter, you know what I mean? That was the stigma around it, was these gods walking around amongst us, you know, these crazy animals, cage fighters, to now we consider these people athletes, which is what they are, you know what I mean? And it's taken such a long time to get you, and people have played their roles, and as the sports become more professional. So what I want to ask you you've been around the MMA scene for quite some time. What has been the biggest standout for you in the evolution of MMA as a whole, like as athletes? Or obviously the show's gotten massive, but what's the biggest things that you've seen change?
I think one of the biggest things you have to mention is the professionalism.
Sure.
I think from where I first saw events in, you know, the Standard Bank Arena and stuff like that,
Sure.
and through the EFC evolving, you know, them coming onto the scene and putting a structure there for people to actually take the sport to a different level, and you got sponsors coming in, and that really elevated the sport. And that elevation had a separate or had a knock-on effect for the fighters, because the fighters, you know, saw it as a hobby, and now all of a sudden it became professional, and they needed to start treating it like that. And so that was a major change. Guys had to now start consulting a lot of different people, and they had to conduct themselves in a different manner. And so I think that's the biggest thing. I think in a fight, for a fighter, one of the biggest things that I would say have changed there in the last couple of years is you could have been a traditional martial artist and then try and make that work in your MMA fights. Nowadays, it's not possible anymore.
Sure. You
need to have integration, and you need to have multiple skill sets. And you can come from a traditional background, but you need to understand where you can apply it. And if you try and apply that in the wrong area, you're gonna have a tough time. So that's also been a big evolution for me, is like really spending quality time in different facets that would not necessarily have been your major skill set, but bringing that up to a level where you're at least competent. And then after doing that, then making everything congruent and like finding your own style and how to switch between, you know, one thing and another thing, and how to make that up into a point where it's almost seamless.
Sure.
Where it becomes, you know, from one technique, flying from one technique to the next becomes almost one technique, you know, going through that transition. So I think those are the two major things that have changed for me.
Sure. It's obviously the evolution of the platform has just become greater and greater and greater. And I mean, obviously, there's a long list of guys, you know, like what I'm trying to find is the South African version of the Dirty Dozen, you know, the guys that had to break the ground, you know what I mean, to bring us to where we are. And it's, you know, that's the way I suppose technology kind of works. Like everyone forgets where we started and where we are. You know what I mean? That's what's always great to chat to guys like yourself and hear almost like what you've seen and where it all started and where you are now. I mean, is it obviously we've seen a slight resurgence of yourself popping up in our gym here and there. So let's talk about now 2018, what's going on. We've seen you around with at Gracie Kalami. So are you just popping in as a friendly old visit, or are you involved a little bit there? Or?
I am involved, but we're a bunch of guys that, you know, since my days starting out at Fight Fit, I made friends with all the fighters. I mean, we were like a family,
sure.
and a brotherhood, and a bunch of us have stayed connected. And I had some injuries and some things that happened in my life, and I, you know, went off the scene slightly, and I wasn't completely out of it. I still had my own jiu-jitsu school. I was running things there. I was just out of the MMA scene for a bit. And then some of the guys started approaching me and asked me if I would come back and help them. And I really missed it, and I really wanted to get back in. And I've always stayed in contact with them. So
sure.
We've got a bunch of guys now that have that started training together, and, you know, we're open. There are anybody that wants to train. I think there's, you know, this kind of opens up a different conversation, sure, in terms of politics and all of that type of thing. And I'm not a big fan of that.
Sure.
I'm a fan of MMA. I'm a fan of Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a fan of arts, you know, martial arts in general, and the athletic side of things and the professionalism. So I think there's a lot to learn. And that's why we started a group. We use FIT, the Gracie Kalami gym, as a base. And then we have different people coming in and training together, sharing knowledge. And that was the basis that we all came together and started training together. Is we actually had a conversation, and we said, listen, nobody's above somebody else. You know, we have certain people that will guide processes and that type of thing, but that's all of that stuff's open for conversation. But basically we're getting together to share knowledge. And to improve everybody in the team. And we started like that. There's some interesting things coming up. Some of it I can talk about, some not. But Shauna's fighting. She's got a fight now in August in the UFC.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to see her return. And it's just really, really nice to just spend time with those guys. So that's one of the elements and the things that I'm involved in the MMA side of things. So I'm helping out. I'm doing consulting. Basically, I've got some other professional fighters that I work with, and so I'm a little bit different when it comes to let's say the normal MMA coach in South Africa and jiu-jitsu coach. Like I like to do consulting now, where I can work with different people.
Sure.
And it's not. I don't really mind what school you are. I don't care what the background is. You've got a fight coming up. You've got a specific problem. I like finding solutions to problems. That's what I do. Okay. So you've got a fight coming up. Then I'll help you for that. We'll train for that. We'll make a game plan. That's one of my strengths. Studying opponents, studying your skill set and what you need to improve on to get to a different level. So that's one side of it. My jiu-jitsu kind of the same. I've got a core bunch of guys that I'm working with that have been with me for many, many years. And I really enjoy that. I'm going online with my jiu-jitsu stuff and I'm doing seminars, moving around. At the same time, I've got guys that come in and want to do specific jiu-jitsu, have specific jiu-jitsu problems, and then I help them to solve those problems. So again, I'm doing a lot of consulting, but my main drive is to go online and just open it up. I was bogged down quite a long time in a functional training facility, and with the way that we were doing our sessions and stuff like that, the MMA training and jits. And I feel like it's time to just move out a bit. You can only reach so many people. Sure. And with politics, that also closes down your whole reach.
Sure.
So I wanted to open that up a bit. I think knowledge. It's important to share knowledge. I think all the way around, we've got so many really great people in South Africa in terms of MMA knowledge and jiu-jitsu knowledge, but a lot of people just don't get along. There's so much back in politics that eventually gets to a point where people don't share the knowledge, and it actually keeps the whole
stagnates everything. It's without venturing into politics, it's breaking down the barriers to open doors is also something that's happening quite a bit, especially in jiu-jitsu. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, there's a bunch of guys that started a movement called Zero Jitsu. So it's like a traveling open mat kind of thing. I think they've done 3. They did Alberton Art Suave, East Rand BJJ, and my home Gracie Lovo. That's the 3 they've done so far. So their whole thing is to kind of like, say no bullshit, no politics. We want to travel around. We want the community to integrate a bit better, which the community does. But it's the thing with jiu-jitsu, what I find the community is all based on competition. Yeah. So the competition community, because it's generally the same kind of guys competing. They all know each other, and there's quite a cool ethos going there. But the broader spectrum, like people still feel like, I don't know, sometimes I feel strange because my own gym thinks I train elsewhere all the time, and I'm like, guys, like I'm here 4 days a week. Like, what are you talking about? Like it's just weird because I like to travel. My whole thing is, at Gracie Bar I love at the moment, we've got like a rotation of black belts coming from Brazil, which has a lot of pros and a lot of cons. I mean, as a competition team, I think it's quite weird because there's not enough time to get to know each individual to kind of assess and help and develop a game plan. There is to a limited amount, but as a broader spectrum, it isn't. But look, I haven't competed too much this year, so I can't really say on how that's working. But at the same time, every person that comes and leaves you with something. Yeah. You know what I mean? I can pretty much name every professor that's been, and I can tell you what I still use now that they've given me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that in itself is such a beautiful thing in martial arts, is to impart something on someone, you know what I mean, to learn something from someone. Like, I mean, I get to roll with Richie, not as much as I'd like to, but it does happen, and the stuff that he teaches me is revolutionary from what I've been taught elsewhere, you know what I mean. And slowly for yourself this all starts to come together, and I think people are generally quite like reluctant to train elsewhere, you know what I mean. Like, and I don't think that's the right way. I mean, obviously it's quite a global topic about cross training in different gyms and with different people, but I think for yourself personally as a martial artist, why would you not give yourself every opportunity to learn? You know what I mean? And I think that's the beauty of it. And I think if everybody can kind of just like You know, like a funny example, you mentioned seminars. Richie was telling me he did a leg lock seminar in a neutral territory, so it would open the doors for everybody. So I asked him, so how many people came that weren't from your gym? And he laughed, you know what I mean? He's like, but that's the story in itself.
100%.
That's the weird thing, and it's such a I don't know what it is, man. Look, I know all gyms are capable, all gyms are guilty of that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we had like Cyborg last year to a seminar, and I was like,
I was there,
yeah, we better make sure we get in here, because yes, there's going to be people queuing at the door, and like 70% is your own gym, and you're kind of like, okay. So I was just, you know, it's such a weird thing, but I think obviously as the sport evolves and people start to open their doors a lot more, I think we'll see that change quite a bit, and I think that's happening already, to be honest. I think the funny thing is, like, FFM is a good example, because for so many years they had this massive stigma around them, you know what I mean? Like, people are like, no, you can't go there, you know, you're going to snap an ACL or something crazy is going to happen. And, you know, like, and I go there and I'm like, but guys, like,
it's just normal people.
Yeah, it's just normal people, man. Just calm down. You know,
the big thing is ego. We need to talk about ego. We need to talk about trying to prove yourself. So I think that's, like, in general, you know, people try and keep things for themselves because they want to be the best. And it's not about you being the best. Like I always say, if I'm the best wherever I go, then what did I impart to my students? I've got the story that I tell, and I say, if it took me 10 years to be a black belt and I impart all my knowledge on somebody else, like, you know, it should take them 8 years to do it, because they're going to learn along the way. They're going to pick up their own things, and everything that I've learned, if I impart that on them, then they shouldn't have to go through that same process again. And you can actually, in that, you can speed up that process by just imparting all the knowledge. But what happens is, and I've seen it so many times, you get guys come out and they do a seminar, black belts, and they don't give all the information. They don't give all they do a basic thing. You can buy that off a DVD. And then you roll with them. And I've had an opportunity to roll with quite a few of them. And when you roll with them, you feel something very different from what they were teaching. Like, the technique's a technique, but the finer details of it and how they do it, and the little nuances that actually makes those things work and make it work at the highest level, they don't give that away. And it's always, you know, I've experienced that quite a lot. And I think in sharing knowledge, that's a big problem, because guys share knowledge, but they share up to a point. So the ego thing there is a big thing. And I don't want my students to go train with somebody else, because then maybe they'll go there. Hey, if they want to go there, then let them go. You know, always leave the door open so they can come back. But if they feel like they're going to get more there, then do it. And if they feel like they want to train there, like, sometimes, then do it, because they can bring that knowledge back to your school again. So I think that's a super important thing. I think the other thing you touched on that I would really like to speak about is the competition thing. Where we've got this competition scene. It's always been like that. Even when I started in Jiu-Jitsu, like, it was the guys that were competing, and the other guys, you know, Jiu-Jitsu's got a high turnover rate, and people like, fall out quite a lot. And the percentage of people that make it to black belt are like 1% or something like that. It's crazy. But I think it's because it's very competition focused. And, you know, it's one of the things that I feel it's such a valuable, integral part of my life, and in the way that I do, you know, handle all the challenges in my life. It's got to carry over, and everybody can benefit from that. And if we're so focused on competition and the competition side of things, we're losing like probably 70, maybe even more % of people that would like to do the sport. So I've got some students that have had like the worst things happen to them. They've had injuries, like knee injuries. They've had operations. They had heart problems, you know. And they used the brotherhood of Jiu-Jitsu to get through all these challenges. And that's the camaraderie around it. Those were the and the lessons we learn on the mat, dealing with difficulty. Those things really help get through that. And everybody in our school learned when these things happen, and some other people had to go through it. So I think there's so many valuable lessons that can be learned. But if we competition focused, none of those guys would be training with me. And in all schools, I think that is true. It's not just, you know, my school.
Yeah, it's a strange one, because I actually, where I originally started, there was like a competition was like frowned upon. You'd probably be kicked out the door, you know. which was strange to me because, you know, I want the option. You know, that's a weird thing. So obviously my gym is very competition orientated, and there's a lot of, you know, let's say focus on competition. But like I was thinking about it this past weekend, because we obviously didn't have the numbers we normally do, and why that's happening. And it's the strange thing about competing, especially in a martial art, is the way I see it is the vulnerability of it all. You know what I mean? Because you know, like you've trained with all of these people, and now everyone's watching you to see what you've done. I mean, my first competition ended up in me being guillotined off my feet. You know what I mean? That's how it went for me. I was just happy to leave with my spine still attached. You know what I mean?
You're lucky,
yeah. You know what I'm saying? But it's like. And it's a weird feeling, you know, especially the first one. I think it's such a strange feeling. Like you're vulnerable, you know, everybody's watching you, you know, like, do you know enough? And then, you know, like, you know, all those doubts start to pop into your head. And what is the strategy? And like, I still remember the guy, like, got his grip on my lapel, and I was like, oh my God, this is not going to end well. I knew straight away I was in shit, you know what I mean? Like, the dude was just a monster, man. And I was like, well, at the end of the day, we're both white belts as far as I know. So let's see what happens. You know, I made a mistake and I went. And I left straight away knowing, like, look, I made a mistake. I could have done better. You know, that's the positive side of jiu-jitsu. And I think it puts you in a place where you kind of understand where you are and what you've done and what you need to do. But the competition can become quite draining, you know what I mean? Like for someone who played a lot of, you know, like reasonably high level sport, I kind of enjoyed that interaction of yourself, you know what I mean, dealing with nerves and you know, like all of that kind of stuff, which is, you know, like makes you feel alive, but it's not for everybody at the same time. And I think where a lot of schools get it wrong, they kind of force feed you this, you should do a competition, competition, and then the person gets there and maybe their personality is not developed for that, you know what I mean? They're like, look, I don't really want to be here, you know, and then they end up getting guillotined off their feet and feel embarrassed, you know what I mean? So it's a hard line to follow. I think somehow both BJJ schools, and look, I'm not a professional, I'm probably talking out of place, and I think competitions themselves have to find a way to make it more user friendly, you know.
I think a big maybe a big solution for that is where is the focus? Like when you do competition, it's all about going out, being the best, yes, but being the best against other people. But using that as a measuring stick and a yardstick can become very dangerous, because I can beat 10 people and doesn't mean that I got any better.
Sure.
You know, I just beat 10 people on the day. But if I use myself as a measuring stick and trying to get better in myself, then I'll hold myself to a completely different standard. So in general, I try and teach to people to be better, you know, today than I was yesterday, and I measure myself. And if I go out to a competition, I see it as a test, but I see it firstly as a test to myself. Can I do what I've been training to do? And then as a test to see where I am in terms of other people. But that's not the main measuring stick that I measure my jiu-jitsu on.
Sure.
You know, my jiu-jitsu might not be improving in terms of a guillotine or a guillotine defense for 5-6 months. I might be still getting caught by guillotines or whatever. But as a person and going through the process and my ego being checked and me being my resilience being checked and my consistency of coming back and my persistence of getting it right. For 5 months, I might have been working on that,
sure,
where my guillotine might still suck or my guillotine defense might still suck, but I've been working on other things that are even more important than that guillotine. And when the guillotine comes into play and I've got all those other things done, well, then you've got a problem.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and that's what I'm trying to, you know, to rather get at with guys is to start measuring yourself. Because I feel like in the competition element, there's too much outside competition. And then what starts to happen is I might have a difficulty on the day. Somebody else might just really beat me on the day. And then all of a sudden, you start feeling like you're not good enough. And you start feeling like that now becomes your reality.
Sure.
And that isn't. That's a snapshot of that moment. It's not really. I had that feeling after winning a competition. And it was a good win for me. And I kind of put it in perspective because at that moment, for that second, I got a medal. And then after that, the next second, who would get the medal then? And then the second after that, and in a week's time. And so anytime you do well, it's amazing. And for that moment, but you always got to understand it was that moment.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And life's carrying on and moving forward. And if you constantly measure yourself from medal to medal or whatever, I think it will become an empty journey, or there'll be, it will become a problem at some other stage. And the longevity of it is in your self-improvement.
Sure.
So,
the one massive thing about competitions locally is the standard. The level of competition is good. SABJJF puts on international quality events, so for the guys that really want to go and compete overseas, it's not like this, like deer in the headlights once they get there. Look, it's obviously on a bigger scale, but I think the way everything runs, it's smooth, it's professional. So that's such a good thing, and it's massive. I feel like that's massively important for the development of jiu-jitsu, and I think it'll, perhaps. I think we're a couple of generations behind. There's like, I see kids in our gym and they're like absolute killers, man. I'm like, jeepers, how do these kids know this stuff? You know what I mean? And I think as those kids progress into black belts and stuff like that, I think that'll give you another door. You know what I mean? Where people that really want to compete on an international standard, they'll have that groundwork here locally, which will become massively important. But like I said, I don't think competing is for everybody. I would still say everyone just try it, Try it with an open mind and an open heart, you know what I mean? Don't go with expectations of whatever, just go and see what it's all about and feel it for yourself. I think it's quite good to feel that rush through your body, to deal with those emotions. So yeah, man, I think competitions, it has its place, but it's I think some people just drive it too much, and it's hard to say where the boundary is, what's too much, what's too little, kind of thing. But it's, we're a developing nation, I guess, so we'll figure those things along the line. What I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, we were put in touch through a mutual sponsor,
yes, in
Warpath. Just briefly tell us on what's going on there and what you're doing, because I believe you're quite involved with the next step of jiu-jitsu with them.
Yeah, I became the brand ambassador for Warpath, and Agri and myself have been working together on some basically some clothing, some gis and some products and stuff like that. And then I'll be doing some work for them in terms of seminars and different things. So I'm really looking forward. So far it's really been awesome. I've had great support from them. They've got really cool kit and high quality stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this year is going to go and what's going to happen. And he's got a lot of ideas of what he wants to do, and I'm fully supporting him in that. And he's got some ideas for me and for my business and where I can go. And it's just a really cool partnership at this stage for us. And I really like the stuff, so I like wearing it. So for that matter, I'm definitely involved in the promoting of it. I think it was for a long time for me. It was really hard finding good quality stuff.
Sure.
Talking about gis, finding gis is super hard. You had to get guys that traveling in their bags, putting in their bags, and
would you mind putting 6 extra kilos for me?
Yeah,
in the bag?
Exactly.
That's
and
cool.
You've got Brazilians coming here with no clothes and a bag full of gis, and then selling it at the boot type of thing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, this stuff's accessible,
sure,
and good quality. I can't tell you, I'm a little bit awkwardly built. I've got long legs and some different things, and it's always hard finding a gi that fits. And all of a sudden, all these problems are kind of now out the way. Yeah. So I'm very fortunate for that, and that's something a lot of people never know about. Now you go online, you go to a store and you can buy this stuff, and it's accessible. Before we had to wait, my gis patched, and I had to sew it up 15 times before somebody comes here with a bag again.
Yeah, man, it's crazy stuff. So it's fair enough to assume we'll be seeing a lot more of you in the BJJ world. Fantastic. Yeah. And where can people follow you, get in touch with you? Obviously, you do quite a bit of teaching still. You're running a little school out of your home. Mm-hmm. Where can people find you and get in touch?
I travel around a lot, but nielgeyser.com is my main site. There you'll find all the information about what I'm doing and what I can do and stuff like that, and how I can help people. And then I've got my Instagram handle is Niel_Geyser. It's Niel Geyser. And Facebook, I'm pretty much between Facebook and Instagram. Sometimes on my Twitter, not that much. Yeah. I'm getting better at that. Social media wasn't my best thing. That's why I'm a ghost. But I'm picking it up now. I've got a YouTube channel that we're starting to load up now with some videos and some techniques and stuff like that. So you can watch out for that. but mainly my website.
Cool.
Yeah, fine.
Fantastic, man.
Awesome.
Niel, thank you so much for your time, man. I think that's all we really want to talk about. I think we went on quite a little journey there. Fantastic, man. Thanks very much for your time, man.
Thank you.
And we're out.